I will. Okay. Okay, the Zoom session's going. Sorry about that. Now, in our data sources, our data set here has our inventory table. When you expand it, you'll see all the columns. When you click this gray drop-down arrow, you'll see the different choices for how to format it. And we want to use the data grid view. Notice you could customize it and do all sorts of things. All right, I'm going to grab this table then, here where the icon is, and click and hold and drag it onto my form. Now, the way we did it in the video, you built the data source manually, and then you attached it to the data grid. Doing it the way we just did it now, we build the data source using the graphical tools and attached it dynamically by dragging and dropping it onto our form. Now, since we did it dynamically, dragging and dropping onto our form, it automatically created this navigator toolbar. I'm going to expand my data grid by saying doc in parent container. And then we could, if we wanted to, edit our columns. And for each of our different columns, you should be able to find like your width and things like that. Okay, so we've got it all set to where it's taking up our whole data grid. Now with this table, it doesn't really need to, of course, but that's all right. Let's run it. And we should be working just with those few steps. So we've got our car table here showing, and we should be able to update stuff, whatever we want, and then click our save data icon and have it save. We can move through our table with our navigator tool. So let's look at our code. We saw last time, just barely, that there wasn't much code generated, but there was some. So if we click Save Item, we're going to validate our form, basically. We're going to tell our binding source, which is our database connection, to end editing, and then we're going to update our table adapter, which we built dynamically using that data source. When our form loads, we're going to fill our table adapter. So all of this stuff is kind of hidden in this table adapter. So when we do something like this where we drag and drop and generate it, it's really nice, it's really dynamic, it's really simple, and it's really easy. And we could have a junior programmer in our shop create all these forms for us that have all these data grids. But now if we need to change something to fix the way something works, we have to find it hidden, right? Because it's not as apparent to us as it is if we have those select statements right in our code, like that very beginning program we looked at. That's like the clearest, the easiest to understand. This one is much easier to develop, but it's got some hidden stuff. So let's go find that hidden stuff. If we go back to our form, down in our container area, we'll see all of those objects that our code refers to. Most of them we don't have to worry about too much. But our data set, if you remember that flow chart I gave you last week, we would have our data set and all of these different components on that flow chart. Most of them now are here. So our data set is going to be our reader object. We saw all these great things. What we're really concerned about is our data set. So in our Solution Explorer is an easy way to find all that information. Find your data set object and double click on it. When you double click on your data set object, you'll see your data set in the data kind of build format. The first thing we should notice is it has all of our columns for our inventory table. And then for our inventory table adapter, it actually has that as a component. So that's where the information about that table adapter is. And it says we have an SQL thing named fill. So let's click on that once. If you click on it once, you'll see that fill method has an SQL statement associated with it. Now, there are ways that we can change this SQL statement or command. First of all, over here in the properties, we can click on the ellipsis, and that'll bring up this query builder. Or we can right-click here and choose configure and bring up the query builder.
Where did you?
Lots of tools.
What object or what will you click on to get the query properties?
Okay, let me go back. So you want to start. Stop
I'm in that screen.
it. Okay. So where I started, let me show you. Double click your data set. Then down here in your table adapter are all of the methods you've created to access this table. So if we click once here on this fill method, we see the command, the SQL command. On the SQL command, we can click the ellipsis to change it. We could just type it in if we wanted to too. I mean, if we knew what we wanted that SQL command to be, we'd been working on it, we could just paste it right here, no problem. But if we're building it in our program, the 3 ellipsis will take us to this query builder. This query builder is a tool that is really similar to a lot of tools that you'll see when you're working with databases. So if you've ever worked with Microsoft Access, it looks a lot like making a query with Microsoft Access. It starts out with the table up here at the top. You select what columns you want. And then in the middle, it says, okay, of all these columns, you know, do you want to sort it? Do you want to filter it? And most of ours are pretty empty there. We just want to see them. And then down in this third section, it shows you the resulting SQL statement that is being created by the information you're putting here in this middle area. When you get your SQL statement done, you can click Execute Query, and the system will actually run it for you. And you can see what data you get back from it. So it's a good place to practice coding SQL code, trying different things. So this is our fill method. Its SQL statement says select all 4 columns from inventory. Now, you can stay where you are, but I'm going to go back to our form code and remind you that in our form load, we run the fill. So that's where we're making that connection. Right here in our code, we're saying you should find a method in the inventory table adapter called fill. Run that to fill my data set. Okay, so we can see all of these pieces tied together, but there are a lot of pieces. Now, I want to create a new method, a new select statement for our program that is based on the make of the car, like VW, okay? So I don't want to just get all of the SQL statements. So let's create a new one. Under your inventory table adapter, right-click and add a query. We want to use SQL statements. We want to select statement that returns rows. This looks all fine. I'm going to go to the query builder because I want to be sneaky. And I think what I want to do is here in my SQL statement, I want to add a where clause. And I want to say where our model, oh, it's make, isn't it? Where make equals @ make. And the @ tells the query builder that this is going to be a parameter value that we're going to supply at runtime to fill in the rest of this SQL statement. Okay, so our where clause will be finished at runtime. Now, if you look at it, you should see that in the filter clause of your make column, because it's going to filter only the makes that match our query. Okay. Now that looks good. There's our final query. Let's finish. And now I have a new method here under our table adapter. I want to change its name though. So in its properties, where it says fill method name, let's make it be fill by make. And on the get method name, let's make it be get data by make. Notice how for this new method that we actually created there, now we have a parameter name within our parentheses. So that's what tells it, okay, I'm going to be passing that value at runtime. Okay, so now let's go to our form. And what I'd like to do is have a place in my toolbar. Let me get some of this out of the way here. Right up here at the edge of our binding navigator toolbar, I'd like to add some more things. So I think I want to add like a text box where we could type in like VW or BMW, and then beside that a button to execute the search for doing that. So on your form, if you click on this binding navigator, which is just a toolbar, you should see the icon show up to add a new item to the toolbar. So click the drop down there and let's add a separator. And then let's add a text box. Now, in our properties, let's give this text box a good name. It's going to be TXTBX make. Now, when someone mouses over it, I'd like a nice tooltip to display. So I'm going to go find our tooltip text property. And in that, I'm going to put enter a make and click search. Now that should show up when they mouse over it. So that'll work for where to enter. Now I need to add a button. Everybody get the text box okay? Got it, yay. So let's add a button, drop down, button. Now in our button, let's give it a good name. BTN search. And then we want a good image for that. So in your image properties, let's click on the ellipsis, and we want to put the image into our resource file. And let's go find one on the S drive in that icons folder. So click import, go to the S drive. Do we have anybody that can't get to the S drive? If you can't, let me know and we'll email them to you. And then CIS151, course data, icons. Now I'm just going to go ahead and get a standard search icon. They're like the hourglass. They seem to be fine. Like that. Okay, I think that's all we need for that one. So what we want to do then is add some code to that button click event to make our data grid fill using our separate method. So see if you can click on your button to get an event added. Mine, it acted really weird this morning and I'm gonna have to save, I think, or something. I'm gonna save all and then see if I have more success double clicking my button. Be very careful because it gave me a really weird event procedure this morning when I went too fast. Like, no, it wasn't ready, so save it. Did yours give you a weird one? Make sure it's your button event procedure and not some weird system one. Okay, so if somebody clicks on this, we want to do basically the same code as we have up here, except instead of using our .fill, we'll use our .fill by make. So this dot, and notice how in this example, we really see why using the this clause can help with IntelliSense, because once we type the this dot, we're still getting a million items that are part of this application, but we can find all of these different components so much easier than if we just try to find them out of thin air. That's why they do that. Inventory table dot adapter dot fill by make. And then the first thing that we have to pass it is our data set, which is going to be the same. And then notice it's griping at us because it says it needs another parameter. It needs a string that is our make. So let's pass it our text box make.text. Let's run it, see if it works. I think we're good. Okay, so now I've got my form here. I'm going to try to get just VW. Search. Oh, it worked. Okay. Pop quiz, how would we make it execute that when they press enter? Do you remember? Go to our form. What property is it? Your accept button. Oh, look, it's not giving it to us because it's not a normal button. So that's one problem with us doing it this way, but I like doing it this way. I think it works really well. It's nice and slick for our user. So everything is working as everybody's working, getting stuff. So yay! So we can control it. And so what you've seen has been a variety of ways to access the database. I know it has been a wide variety, and there are still additional ways. So I hope you're feeling comfortable with it, that you're just seeing different ways to get to the same thing. But if you're not, let me know so we can get together via Zoom or do anything to try to clear stuff up, because the majority of people are feeling pretty good. Yes, sir?
I got a constraint exception.
What's it tell you?
It says fail to enable constraints. One or more rows contain values violating non-null, unique, or foreign key constraints.
So what's that telling you? You've got a car in your database that, or a car ID that you don't have a car for, or a customer ID that you don't have a customer for. So when we created our tables, we put in our constraints, so we shouldn't have violated any, but we did put in data as we went, so you might have to check. One thing that you could do is clear out your tables. Let's go look at it, because I know it was definitely a problem for me. I used to always kid around with my PC maintenance students that if they knew how to use commands at the command prompt, they could at least look like they were thinking about something while everybody was staring at them and they were trying to figure out a problem. This is the same way with data grids. You guys can throw something together so fast, you can get everybody else off worried about, oh my God, look, it works so good. And then you can figure out what you need to do. It's a great thing to kind of distract everybody. And it's a great tool for prototypes and, you know, making sure that all of the analysis is correct on your system, even if it's not something that you use in production. Okay, looking at our databases, I'm gonna go find mine. If you expand and look at your database diagram, you have to right click and modify. It crashed. That's how I was handling database diagrams at the beginning of the semester. I might just need to double click on it. Did you guys just open? Okay, so everybody's crashed. Just opened. Double click on it. Come on, open for me. Did it crash again? Yep, mine too. So nah, it's just a piece of crap. So in your databases, if your diagram won't work, just go to your tables. And first of all, let's right click on our customers and edit top 200 rows and see what customers you have. I have 1, 2, 3, and 4. Then right click on your inventory and edit top 200 rows and see what car IDs you have. I have 25 through 32. Then finally, your orders are dependent upon both of those tables. So when you edit your orders, you have to make sure your customer ID exists in your customer table and your car ID exists in your car or inventory table. So Austin, that's where it is. It's somewhere that there's probably a car ID. Since I use that cutesy 10,000 number, messed us all up. But that's the integrity that it's concerned about. Is that not matching up, right? Okay, everybody good? I'm going to close out of SQL Management Studio. There is another table in the chapter that they create, but we're not going to create it right now. I'm going to close out of this application if you guys are all okay with it. Everybody got it all working? In our class, for our presentation, we have several people that have too close to the same topic. So if you would take a look at that discussion, I think it was Ethan that was the first person that kind of reserved that sort of C# topic. So look through, and there are several of you, and I noted the people that you need to be concerned with. The thing is, if your audience has already seen the information, you'll be more nervous and they'll be more bored. So we really want to make sure everybody's doing something separate. So let's see what we got there in that thing. I don't think Alex has ever missed before. I'm just going to go down to the bottom because I know that's where. Tell me if I'm wrong on timing, because I tell you this thing just rearranges itself. It's like, oh, I'm going to put the newest ones at the bottom now, but they weren't yesterday. So Ethan has why C# is easy to learn but hard to master, plus some advantages to learning it. So that sounds good. Keegan's is why C# is still worth learning after all this time and how it has stayed relevant. Too close. Austin, advantages of C# as a main language for now and the years to come. Too close. So one of you, I would suggest, and I'm going to leave it open for you guys to change that. One of you, I would suggest mobile apps using Xamarin with C#. That's our mobile app development class. That would be a really big topic that we had a lot of presentations on last year. And last year, that's what I had a problem with, was the Xamarin topic everybody was choosing. That's a really good one. And there's a lot of material available for it. And there's a meetup like Wednesday, I think, that's Tim just posted, is going to be that same topic. So when you wanted to jump on that, I would grab it. Xamarin and mobile apps. One time I had to go and teach teachers, and I was really nervous. There was like 100 people in the room, and I didn't, so I wasn't nervous at all. And then the guy before me gave my presentation, because we'd had to turn him in like 2 weeks before, and she'd sent him out to us, and he stole my presentation basically. So then I was really nervous when I was talking to 100 people. So you do not want it to be the same as somebody else's. It's really bad. Dogs. Okay, so where are we? There we are. Presentations. This week we're kind of talking about additional ways of connecting and some ways of securing data. So we have some interesting stuff out here in Canvas. And in this section, we really have a couple of chapters, like pieces. So we got an overview here. Chapter 20 from page 781 on, it talks about serializing data. And then chapter 12 talks about link. We've kind of worked all the way around link. We've seen some other things about link. We've gone around it. Finally going to look at that chapter. But it's going to be a thing that you're going to do mostly on your own. So there's some link training that goes along with it that's separate. This is one of those things where it's an external training site. You'll do a screen print of your final score or whatever it shows you. So it goes really fast, and it's really good training about link. It really makes everything simple. So the other thing we have here is all this serialization stuff and serializing. serializing is where we can take a data stream and we can convert it from ASCII encoding to some other sort of encoding. So to me, in my mind, I think of it as like a form of encryption. It's really not. It's just that we're encoding this data in a coding set that's not as humanly readable. So why would I do that? Well, there's a few different reasons, but it could be that my data is so secure that I just want it stored in the database in a format that nobody can read. I don't even want the database administrator to be able to read that data as they're doing queries and maintaining the database. So I can put it in a different encoded format. Now that means when I read it back in, I'm gonna have to decode it. It's gonna have to be deserialized. So, well, I want you to learn a little bit about doing that. Your assignment here, there's a quick PowerPoint that talks about it. This video is totally optional. It's a couple years ago. Several students wanted to get together and create this application together. So we did a real early Zoom session. You might not want to watch it. What we result with is given to you in the assignment. So we'll give you that. So we had a fun time doing it, but you might not want to watch it. So if you look at the assignment, I actually have an example zip file posted in the assignment. It's all clean. It should be the kind of code you looked at the first database application where it has the select statements. And you'll see in this example that we create an object like an employee, and then we serialize it and just put it into the database, into the table. Now, that's another reason we might want to serialize something. Maybe we don't have database administrator support, or we don't have the time to create a table with all of the columns that we need for our table. We can take the whole thing, this object like this, and serialize it so it's just one big clump of data and just push it into our table into a row. Now it's out there. It doesn't have any keys, it doesn't have any information hardly at all, but it's there in the database. So we can do that if we have to. Now, a couple years ago, one of the capstone teams decided that they would do that with some of their data because that would be the easiest to get the database created. And some of the people that were in the capstone meeting called them on it. They said, can you search for that data now in the database? Could we do a where clause like we just did? No, because we don't have any specific columns. The data is all encoded. So we would have to read everything, decode it, then rush through it to try to get information. So it does limit our capabilities in working with our data in that after it's already saved. But it's a really interesting stuff. So what I'm going to beg you is to make sure you go through the PowerPoint in this assignment over the weekend so that Monday, if you run into any questions on it, we can talk about them, okay, so that we can get everything lined out. The other thing that's an assignment is your employee full-time list. So for your earlier assignment, you should have already created your employee table that's just out there. Now you're going to create a second table which has those full-time fields. So you're not going to add to the employee table. You're going to create a separate table that's full-time employees. And you're going to have to join those two in your queries to get your data. So again, you know, if you get a chance to look at it, do. We're in a lot different shape than the other class just because of the way our guest speakers are organized. So next week, we're supposed to have an exam. I don't have it out there for you yet. And I will, if we have it, give you a good practice exam for it. But we have our guest speakers. And so they're more important than our exam because that exam is just like over one time. So what I'll probably do is set up your exam, if you guys are all okay with it, set up the exam to be done at home at some point before the following Tuesday so that we can get that out of the way of our guest speakers. Now that means Monday we'll have time to work on these assignments, okay? The other class The guest speakers will be here on Monday, so they'll need a little bit more time, but we'll be able to work on them on Monday. Questions about that?
What day are the speakers here for us?
They are here for us on Wednesday, and so they just wanted to switch days so that they wouldn't be gone from work as much all on the same day. So, and then I want to ask them, or I want to be sure one of us does. We've seen all these different ways to access the database. What are they doing? Do they see all these different ways that work? Do they see only straight SQL ways? You know, do they use any of these other tools, or is it something that's all just native SQL? Interesting for us to know. All right, I want to have our groups get together, decide what you want to show everybody else, and how your overall feelings are about our database stuff. If you're in good shape, if you have a lot of questions, if you're struggling as a group, let me know. So I'm going to give you about 5 minutes or so to get together, and then we'll go through you guys real quick. Like I said, just like a highlight from your group. We don't have to see everybody's assignment. Let's see what group you're in. Peter, you're Austin and Christian. Yeah, these guys right. You're right there. You're on it. Okay, I heard from Jay and Keegan, so you guys' group is small again. David, you're with these guys. We have you guys are always such a good big group.
I've been having a problem with everything I like tried to I kept trying to make it look professional. Like I said, I can get rid of the ellipses by messing with them. I got some style, but then I can make some other problems that are hard to call for letters. I found it, but it doesn't work. Yeah. Yeah, I got. I mean, you're able to get color on yours where I get this. The first time, there's so many different. I changed all of them. Another one changed the color, so I think there was a problem with that. Yeah, alternate rows default style. And default style. So those are the two guys. I ended up changing all the ones. Yeah, you can click on the cell and it's where the sketch it actually display. You did it way more complicated. Yeah, so it doesn't work for another side. Yeah. It throws a which shows one with the conversion right or both person. Yeah, I didn't get that. I put like yours is more. I was looking at. I guess there's some other weird thing. My computer, I don't know, I can really like, where to go data grids and all that, and like was trying to do stuff. I don't know, something around this. You know, okay. I mean, okay. Number of those very kind of I made a student like this, but yeah, same thing. I don't I'm trusted. Oh my God! I don't know. I know. It told me that I needed to well, it's the school's computer, so I think you're fine.
I swear that's how they all feel. Keyloggers everywhere.
These computers probably do have them, we just don't know.
Do you think? I think we got infiltrated by another country or something.
That's why I make my password so simple. So that when they steal it, it's like, oh, why did I even bother stealing that? I could have just cracked it and cracked it on my own.
My daughter, are you with me? You're not my daughter.
Yes.
Two different things going on.
Where's this text box? Parse it, doesn't need to. And send that to the page. Somewhere in there.
I got one. That's a handful of information. So I can work if you did.
Don't tell me I will.
Yeah, so I tried. This is, I think it's really interesting.
Oh, it's an interesting.
I tried converting it. It's the way it's such a trick.
That works. Nice. That's search if you're trying to find less than 16.
And I could have just looked for that since the company stuff here last year.
Farther than
Apparently,
I have sort of John's, but
That is very
it's
I don't know if there's like you get, but
because I was basically
so
looking at that cell, I just have 0 in a row. So we have
you're storing your stuff on the right.
That's what it looks like. Is this like a character array?
yeah, right. So whatever's typing, it's to be able to get that first.
Yeah, I didn't realize it was a little
So I guess it's not substring as well.
Really?
Basically, I just set that whole text box.
It's not a
which are arrayed.
Like whenever I started working on this, I also supposed to
And where because before it was like
this. So like when you're first typing out all these things.
okay, so
Yeah, in a data.
so this way it's a little more like
Right. But like if I was just like doing it, but like to actually like know how everything would come together. It's a pretty complicated way to do it, but it works.
Yeah.
I just found this one. I had
The thing is to, otherwise you use substring.
this one, and then you go to this
these two pictures, like starting I'm starting to figure out my mind. What different pieces.
And you can attach the first part.
So it searches for either first name or last.
I'm seeing my code, but I just like, well, yeah. So no, what for first name? Why did I need this? And is it my data set in my or it's just first name? Oh,
I was really good at it. Split on, but it's just like
well, I just did it to where I made it so I was going to copy
zero.
check
The in the library, there are two of them. Yeah, but that's not as big here. Because you can't sit on the version. So right here.
No, but like, I thought my data set was in there.
Oh, okay.
It's like, no, I'm making another data set over here.
This is your
Database is.
That's my
I know.
does it in
Now
a
I
more complicated way.
Yeah.
Mine too. What I would do is I would do a split on the text, that space, and if it's one word, search for it. Yeah, that's.
Yeah, I was thinking about that. I was having such a side. I was like, I don't use
Oh, you put
Look
the
at it.
database in the adapter. I can make it go through the adapter.
I'm just looking at how you pull the information.
Yeah.
It seems like some guys I did like this. No, that's just trying to remember.
Yeah, and they're a little different from the way you do it.
Yeah. And then you go into the row.
This.
Yeah, so that's why I did.
Where you at? This way.
Remember
This
that.
here.
Yeah.
I have a
Connections, that's the one I can remember.
But we actually always got to connect.
Yeah, it's like, okay, I have a connection. What now?
It's like selected or
Like,
so wait.
Zero.
Okay, so your order.
Well, I mean, order of these doesn't.
I know, but just like a little different mentally.
I found it on
Connections. I guess it's like.
This is like needed connection for you guys.
Yeah, because that's the very first thing. So I couldn't understand what he said. Just like, this is
I couldn't build it so long.
that's like a whole separate thing.
I would change the color until like today.
Yeah, and I also knew that it's even called a command field or so. Yeah, actually, like road. Seems like, how come that's what the
You do the
project is, all of those options. I'm like, why can't you just take one out because that's all? Oh, that's like,
Whatever reason, the one that
because those are textbooks where it's like ADO, what is a high level definition, they never, we're, the guy like, planned,
Yeah,
and she
no,
did
it's
something.
something
So that's very, it's like one of the few paragraphs that has
Well, it's almost like and you have all these other pieces that can attach to it. Link you.
yeah, there's stuff that's good. Well, it's like using our own stuff.
Probably like
Using a wire.
So like that. I was making
That's
a list of objects that were the columns against my house. And so that bottom one was putting.
I'm so glad we did this stuff.
And so I was trying to like do
Before I had
not
this week's because like using Management Studio and we were like creating databases and adding tables like with but it's like, and then like I'd be like, okay, I created it, and then it's like, where is it? It's like, oh, I have to restart or like refresh. Sometimes I don't know where I have to restart. And then like, if I screwed up, I'd like try to delete stuff, and he's like, no, you can't delete that one. Yeah, that's really nice.
right there. From within
This is bigger than my entire field.
Right? It is bigger than my
And like my mom
entire.
So like I got a lot of
So it's like, my mom had one. Yeah, that's what I was doing. Yeah, whatever my query was, I created all three of them. And then I realized you didn't see the primary key. It's like, okay, I have to delete everything. It's like,
Okay, we ready?
do this.
Let's do this. Let's get a 3-2-1 up there first. Okay, Rick. We want to hear about one ASCII application or something like that. Go ahead and take over that Zoom session. Unless I still am sharing and we'll have to fix that.
These ones, and when did you guys take it? Because my work is just with like
and
the way that was, I'll take this over to the Excel.
There you go.
That's not really good. I just got them done. There's a lot of assignments that won't be perfect.
we started again. So by the fall, we're all just like,
You guys are attached.
If you guys are in front, you can call yourself whatever you like.
group three.
It's still.
No.
Still new.
I think there's 3 in all.
Yeah. Never was. We just lost one. Should have got that done before he got that call. Could be back, right?
I swear they re-image these machines almost every day now.
You think they do? I feel like they do.
Every time I've tried to get on Zoom, it's asking me to re-download it every single time.
Mine never does.
Mine never does. On the USB, download.
Say what?
What does it say in the installation?
It's its default location, which is on the C drive.
Maybe it's saving it somewhere weird that it says.
Maybe OpenC just doesn't like you often.
That wouldn't surprise me.
Maybe you're getting hacked every day.
Maybe.
Change the.
You know any people like that say that?
What?
And we knew this guy in person who worked on cars, and he did a really good job working on cars, but then we were afraid to take our car to him anymore because he went on and on about how these people from Sweden were attacking his computer and he gave him new IP address, but they would still find him, and then they would get on and destroy car guys.
You gotta
You
watch
got
the
more
Swedes.
people like that? Do it.
You gotta watch the Swedes.
They always have to get guys saying.
It's just the Swedes. It's all their fault. Blame them.
Wrong,
Everyone talks about the Russian hackers. Swedish.
He knew they were after him from his car deal that went wrong. Okay, what's
Polls are worse.
this?
Alright, this is my form. Basically what I did is I had this up here be the first name and the last name. So you just enter in a first name and you should find the first name, and then you just click enter and it will find it. If it's more specific, you can add the last name to it. And when you search, just click enter here and it'll bring you to the very first, or to the name.
Nice.
And the code for it is basically this right here. It just takes this, finds how many is in the row, how many counts are. If the last name is empty, or if the last name is not empty, then it will search both right here, where it matches the first name and the last name together. So they both have to be equal to true. And then it'll take the navigator position item, which is this right here, and sets it to where it found it. If the last name is empty, then it just searches for the first name only.
Very nice.
What if the first name is empty?
Huh?
What if the first name is empty?
Then it just won't search.
Yeah, I just think that. So. It's all family.
Yeah, that'd be my whole family.
Just everybody. Here you go.
Just brothers and sisters. All 2,000.
That was a good solution. How are you guys feeling about the database stuff and everything?
I mean, being in 250 helps.
Feeling clear, it's not like overwhelming you.
Yeah, it's
Jump off the
like
bridge,
now
that's
that I
all
know half the semester of SQL, I'm fine with it.
David hasn't had SQL, so. Have you had a chance to look at that Khan Academy class?
Say what?
Have you had a chance to look at that Khan Academy course?
Yeah.
Has it got any good stuff or not really? Does it have any good information in it,
For
the Khan Academy?
oh, I didn't actually look through it. I was doing more through like Stack Overflow.
Oh, that's fine.
Yeah, go through stuff like that.
I just found that course and thought that would be pretty handy if it was all together.
Yeah.
Information. That's a little bit numbers. Good. Okay, good to hear. Any questions for them? All right, they must have presented themselves very well. Thank you. Let's go to group 3, which is Austin and Andrew now, because they ran off their third person.
No worries, still working.
Yeah, he's still on there, but he just
He
didn't.
does that often.
Yeah.
Good to vote.
Yeah. So this is our review. One we had. I had a lot of trouble with ellipses, and I was just going through all the properties of the data grid thing, and I found a couple that could make the ellipses go away, but then it would like do that with no ellipses, and so this is the best, most aesthetically pleasing thing I was able to come up with last night. And you can even see, I don't know if I wish the app was bigger, that I have animated GIFs for my buttons, which is very impressive.
So what do they do when you use front buttons?
They just, actually, I was gonna copy in the code for the load and update and just put
Oh,
them,
okay.
because those are load and update buttons here. But I actually never got around to copying and pasting that code. And then the select button also does nothing. It's empty. I was trying to figure out what to do, but I didn't. So it's basically, it's just the same general stuff that you walked us through in the video for my code.
Okay, that's great.
On my form, which isn't showed, but I was able to get it to where you could select one of the individual cells. You could press the button to get the cell's information, and it would actually print out the information that was in that cell inside of the label. It just didn't work with numbers. It always throw a conversion error. Can't convert N32 to a string.
Okay. How you guys feeling about database stuff?
I feel like I wasn't confident at all coming into it. And I'm taking 250 and I'm still not confident in that class at all. I feel like this class is helping like a lot. Like being able to see it from two different perspectives, coming at it from a different direction.
I have taken a 250 class. I'm pretty comfortable with all this stuff.
Okay. How's Nat doing? Have you been able to tell? He seems like he's getting stuff accomplished.
Yeah, I think so.
And he's in the 250 class also, so I think he's doing good. Nahala's been gone this weekend. She should have been back today, so I hope she doesn't miss too much. But I know you guys have done it. Good job. Give me the
screen here. All right. So with mine, I did my selection a little bit differently, but I have the text box as well as a search button. So you can actually search from this one search bar. You can search like family ID, the first name, last name, relationship, any of that stuff, and it'll highlight all of the rows relevant with that information. So like if I did age 56, you can search, it'll highlight that. If you did, so Winona is where my mom and my grandfather are from. So if you search that, it will highlight both of those. Search first name, whatever. And you notice that you can do, you can search any word, like you can do either uppercase first or not, it doesn't matter because I've set it up to where it takes the string value and turns it into a char array and then, you know, does the first letter to uppercase. So most of the code there is within this. So the search text box is assigned a variable search, which is then assigned to an array, a char array. And you got that to upper, and then you send it back to the search variable as a new string. And then all that this for each does is goes through each record and deselects previously selected search results. With this one, it's another for each loop. So you run through each record, and then in this one, you run through each of the records as well. And if you find the relevant like search result. So if whatever cell is being matched against search value is equal to that, then it'll select it. And then just have some catches for the exceptions. That's that.
Questions? Pretty nice, huh?
I love the aesthetic of it.
Thanks.
Any others that we should see that are awesome with that?
Mine's almost exactly the same.
Is it? Well, that's pretty awesome. Very impressed with the way you guys navigated through the data sets, because that's really difficult to figure out. There's not a lot of information. So the solution that I showed you then went all the way back to the SQL code to get a new result set. And what you're doing is working with the existing result set. There's benefits to doing those. So I think that was really great. Let's get over here. Okay, how are you guys doing? Strengths, weaknesses, worries, issues?
I personally am really enjoying like being able to access databases and doing it.
Okay, good. They getting a lot out of it. Our other person. No, okay, good. I think you guys are doing great. And I just wanted to have a quick feedback from you to make sure, because sometimes, like when I have tick reactions and I get the brain fog, I think everybody's just fine, and then they're not. So let me know if you're confused, because it's seeming like everybody's just doing a great job. I mean, I'm feeling like you guys are having the best handle on this of any class that I've ever seen, which is just great. So I just don't want to be in some happy little world that let me know. Well, let's look at one other way of messing with databases then. I'm going to log off. Let's go back to your spot. Thank you. I hate that we have people missing, but I always like our lower roots. Easier to get feedback from people. Okay, so I want to show you like the newest way. So each thing that we're looking at as far as different ways of accessing databases are kind of like, it's almost like an evolution of Visual Studio database access, because we started out looking at ADO.NET, which was not the original, but pretty much. And then we looked at using Entity Framework. An earlier release is what I've shown you. And now we're going to look at the latest release of Entity Framework 6. Now, when we get to your MTA exam, you guys are seeing stuff right now that's really heavy on the MTA exam at the end of the semester, your certification exam for Microsoft. They hit hard on database concepts and things like that, because it is so important in C#, and because C# is so tightly coupled with the database, and it does have a lot of classes available. So the things they're going to ask you, are kind of like Microsoft terms, special things to Microsoft that they want you to really think of. So you may see a question that says, in Visual Studio, you can access the data sources panel, you can create a data source, you can connect it to your form, you can have it connect through a model to your database as a business object, blah, 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 blah. What is this feature? And they're looking for Entity Framework. So a lot of times they can have a really, really long question that comes up with a Microsoft term. So they're going to ask you that more than how is a data set used when you're working with the database, because that's kind of stuff where they'll show you code and they'll say which piece is the part you're looking for, but they won't expect you to remember it as much. Is they like those Microsoft terms to be remembered. They work hard coming up with these great terms. Okay, so what's Entity Framework? We've seen it. It allows you to interact with data from our relational databases, our tables. We're going to look at the newest type, Entity Framework 6. It uses an object model. That model that we used was kind of a table model, right? Because as we created our data source, we said we were going to use a table. So we'll be looking more at an object instead of a table. And they like to say it maps directly to business objects. Business objects are your business classes. So in our case,
Our business objects are our inventory table, our customer table, and our orders table. Those are our business objects for our car lot. Whenever we're working with those objects in Entity Framework, they become more than just an object, they become an entity. And so an entity is something that really has another being above being an object. An entity is something you can use directly with LINQ, which is another reason we want to make sure that we do a little bit more training on LINQ. And behind the scenes, the SQL code will be generated for LINQ. LINQ stands for Language Integrated Query. So Microsoft's plan with LINQ all along has been to replace every other way of accessing data with LINQ. So if you want to read a text file, use LINQ. If you want to read a database, use LINQ. So that's the plan, and it's been in the works for a really, really long time. And now with this entity framework, we see LINQ being more integrated into SQL. And there is an old tool called LINQ to SQL that this does replace. So it's something that we'll see. So here's our database. We have our queries and our updates that are coming from our ADO.NET providers, SQL client, SQL server, whatever our provider is, Oracle's server. So we have that direct connection between our database and ADO.NET. ADO.NET knows how to do an insert, how to do a delete, knows all those things are important. Entity Framework lays on top of that ADO.NET and is an interface between us and our application and that provider. So it gives us another layer. As you can tell, it's a really thick layer. It does a lot of work. So it has some important components. Up here on the top, this is what we did today. We took tables and we drug them onto our form. That was like a database first approach, right? That database, that table had to exist before we could create our data source. So the database had to come first. Now, we're going to look at today how we could do a code first approach, which is supposed to mean that the code could come first. So we can actually, with Entity Framework, we could generate code to create our tables if we wanted to. We'll see that the way we're going to use it is a little different than that for today. So some of the things that we have to be concerned about in Entity Framework, our domain model. Our domain model is our domain. My domain here at OTC is this classroom, right? That's like my domain. If I wanted to go further out, I could say, oh, Springfield's my domain, you know, Missouri is my domain. And it depends on how big I want to get as to my domain. But when we're working with our company, we're talking about the organizational model for our company. Do we have cars? Do we have customers? Do we have partners? What do we have? We're going to have something different. That goes into our mapping model, and we've seen how that can affect our properties for navigating through our tables. Some other components that are important to us are transactions, concurrency checking, which involves, you know, who got there first, who gets to update the row if there's contention, and the fact that we're going to do it code first. Okay, so when we look at an entity is a strongly typed class. This is a strongly typed class. See my chains? They're not very good, so I have to tell you that that's what they are. They're chains, because it's really strongly typed. It's chained to that type. So field 1 is an integer. That's the only type it can be, right? And field 2 is decimal, and field 3 is long. So whenever you see in our book strongly typed class, they just mean as compared to a loosely typed class, like you would make it Python, where every data element could end up whatever it wanted. But so our class is strongly typed, and usually one class is a model of a physical database. We usually match up. When we're looking at Entity Framework, we're concerned about this entity data model. Everything in our model is going to be on the client side. It's going to be data that's mapped to a database by our entity framework. And we don't have to map directly to a schema. We'll see what that means maybe. But here's a cute picture of it. They're saying here are these entities. They can sit out here being disconnected. And then if we want to make them be part of our database context, we can start using them and they can start issuing commands to the database. So it's very, very dynamic. Okay, before we can use Entity Framework, we might have to install some things. So this example shows you how to install for SQLite. So let's see if we can do it on our computers, because this morning the options weren't showing up. So we did a little messing around with those install functions, and now it's showing up on mine. So we'll see if it's showing up on yours. Let's try it. If not, it'll just be something I'll have to do in a video, but I'm hoping we can do part of it in class. So let's open Visual Studio. And I'm really looking at our textbook again here. And I'm trying to do the project that they have in chapter 22. And we're just going to start up with it. So let's create a new project. And we want it to be a console app, .NET framework. And let's name it Auto Lot Entities. Oops, wait, don't do that. Auto Lot Console App. I was on to the next thing. Delete it. Just close out of it, go to that folder and delete it. Delete the folder. Because if you don't, it's going to get all messy. Okay, console app, .NET framework, auto lot console app. Oh, look, my folder's all messy. Let me create a new one. Repos 102. I don't know why I just didn't do that way long time ago. Okay, so now we've got this awesome console app. Does everybody have one? Did it create one for you? Got one? Okay, so let's put a folder in this project. Right click on your project, add new folder, and let's name it EF for Entity Framework. Now in that folder, we're going to add this Entity Framework component. So right click and add new item. Now when you go to the new item screen, this is where we had trouble this morning. Click on, is it data? Yeah, data over here on the side. And you should see ADO.NET Entity Data Model. Do you see it? Mm-hmm. Did you guys all see it?
Yeah.
Did they make it happen? Sometimes magic is so weird. Okay, so let's click on that. That's what we want. But let's give it a different name. So we want to call this is going to be our auto lot entities. Okay, so now what do we want in our model? Well, we're going to call it code first, but we have a database. So if we wanted to do this empty code first model, we could actually generate our create table syntax for our database, but we're going to do code first from database. Now, when you click next, we're going to have to create our connection string. It's going to be like, what database? It should just pop up with your existing connection string, which should be okay. You got it? your SQL Server one. Notice now, if you are looking here at the string itself, it's added a couple of parameters. This multiple active result sets equals true, so I could have multiple readers open. And then add equal entity framework. And that's that important thing that's telling the database system itself that we're going to use that entity framework capability. So our development tool has to support it, and our database server has to support it. So we're ready to next. And now I'm going to put in my password. And I'm going to check to save it. I'll have to fix my connection. What is wrong with you? It's trying to use Windows security, so you might have to go in and create a new connection if it's not letting you connect, but if it is, you're great. Because I want SQL Server authentication. Save my password, select my database. Okay. Now, my connection string looks the same, except now I can see my password in here masked. Hopefully I've got my username correct yet, because I have that weird username. Okay, so I'm going to tell it to go ahead and include that sensitive data. You're probably already past here. And now the entity framework goes out to our database and sees what we've got. We would like to be able to access all of our different tables in this application. It's our full application. So we can check tables, but let's uncheck sys diagrams. That's where we saved our database diagram, so we don't want that one. And let's click finish. All right, let's look at what we have now that it created for us. So first of all, what did that do? Right now, my code window is open with our autolotentities.cs. I don't want to really look at that too much right now. I want to use Solution Explorer and see what we have. So I'm going to close that one. Our program.cs, our main, is still empty, so we're not ready to test, but we'll add our tester components here in a minute. So before we look at autolot entity, let's look at like our order. We didn't have any of these classes before in our application. So by adding that entity framework component, notice how it generated all the class code for us. So let's look at order.cs. If you look at it, it's set up as a partial class, but it is a class for our order, and we have all of our properties, and then we have associations with our customer and our inventory table, because our order is dependent on both of those other tables. So that's why we see those associations, because we could ask an order to get all its customers, or we could ask an order to get all its inventory. So it's got those associations already set up for us. Now, what about inventory? It doesn't have those kinds of things. Now, our inventory table is our car table. First of all, notice how it has these extra badges that have these square brackets. These are badges, and we can almost call this decoration. So these are decorating our C# code to tell Entity Framework more than C# is telling it. So here we know our table name. If we look down, you can see here's some sort of weird Microsoft thing that we could research if we wanted to, but it has to do with code analysis. So we could just leave it for right now since we're just looking at code that we understand. Here's our constructor. And for inventory, we might have a list of orders, people that ordered that car. So that's why we see that there. Now for our inventory table or our car table, we have our key. So we have a decoration there that identifies our key. We have a decoration that identifies all of the other columns with what their data type is in the database. So notice how all of that stuff there is, those decorations are going to be used by the entity framework to determine how things should be set up and how to communicate properly with the database. Some interesting things, it says that if your ID field is named ID, it will automatically assume that that's your primary key. There's some other neat things like that with Entity Framework and setting up your tables. Let's look at our customer class. In our customer class, again, we have the code analysis stuff, and we see our key, and again, our different information about how the database sees all of that, those different columns. And then we see, this one makes more sense to me. It's a virtual collection of orders, because for a customer, I might have a whole bunch of orders. Now, we don't have, if you'll notice with our classes, we have a constructor, but we don't have a lot of methods, right? We could add those if we wanted to, though. We wanted to add some extra methods to them. Now, let's look at the auto lot entities. This class ties everything together for us. So it tells us that auto lot entities inherits from DB context, and DB context is the main class for the entity framework. So that's what we're inheriting from. Gives us the capability to read a lot of these things. Then we are passing in the name of our connection string to our constructor, so it knows how to connect. This is the name that that connection string has when we created that entity framework object in our folder. Then we're specifying that we're going to have a set, a DB set of these different tables. So this DB set object is giving us the capability to work with these almost like a list. So it almost could say list there. It's saying a list of customer items from the customer's table, and we can work with them how we want to in that way. Okay, there's some things they want us to change. So let me find those. Oh, the last thing they want us to look at is the app.config file. In your app.config, you should see a new config section named Entity Framework. Here's my section name, Entity Framework. So the only thing that you really need to be concerned with your app config file is your connection string. Of course, if you changed where your database was, you could come in here and just change it in this app.config file. You don't have to worry about going through that wizard again. Either way is fine. So let's change the default mappings for our inventory table, because we didn't name our inventory class inventory. We named it car. So let's go to our inventory class. So we want to change the file name and class name to car. So I want to do it over here in Solution Explorer. And I right click and rename and make it be car.cs. And yes, I want to fix my class. So it should have changed your file name to car.cs. It should change your partial class name to car and your constructor to car. Now let's go look at our orders class because we're going to have to fix it too. So let's save this. What we're doing here is customizing this model because we're saying, well, this model that you generated is good enough, but I actually want it to be a little bit different. I want this word to be car instead of inventory. So let's go to our order class. And in our order class, you should see our public virtual car. We need that to be car. So that was easy enough. Now we need to fix our auto lot entities because we don't have inventories. So let's fix that. We want it to say public DB set car cars. So I noticed right away looking at this, our textbook doesn't really bring it to attention, but notice how we have a singular customer car and order and then plural for our DB set. So that's why sometimes things are so specific about whether you should use a plural or a singular value. So we see our class names are singular, and then it made the whole DB set plural, a bunch of cars instead of one car. Okay, so that should be there. Let's see if there's anything else we need in that one. I don't think so. Let's see, open the file and change the 2 occurrences of inventory to car and DB set cars to car. I only see the 1. Okay, so we'll go there. Now, one more thing that we need to fix. Is this on model creating right here. So that method, of course, is going to run as the model gets created. And let's add some link code here. So I want to add something into this thing. We're going to use the model builder. And we're going to use the model builder to work on an entity. And we say the entity that we want to work on is car. Now, when we're using link, you've probably noticed that you can keep specifying additional parameters just by doing a dot. So we want to update the has many setting. And we're going to set that to our orders table. And then with required, and tell it that the car is required. They don't have a parenthesis there, but I think we need it. And then we'll cascade on delete. We're going to say false. So we don't care if we remove stuff. So we're telling the entity framework that if you run into a car, that's an entity, and it can have many of these orders, and the car option entity is required. All right, so they want us to add some features to our generated model classes. So they say we could override the toString method in the car entity to return the state of the entity. So let's try this. Let's go. They want us to create a new partial class in a new file. So let's add a new file to our project. I'm going to call it a class. And let's name this car partial .cs. And this is pretty cool. So in our car partial, we're going to add in our override toString. And what we want to return in our toString, let's see, we've got a couple comments here. Since the pet name column should be empty, supply the default name of no name. So we're going to return something better than this. Let's return a nice string. This dot car nickname so that's saying if null, we're going to use no name. Is a this dot color. Notice how we're losing some of our IntelliSense since this partial class isn't associated yet with our other class. This dot make. I'm going to keep going. With ID this dot car ID. Okay, so I think that's right. I've got a lot of errors because of, again, it being out there standing alone. So I want to just get to the main. Here we go. We have to add a couple more. So I'm not sure what they want us to do with this because, you know, the lovely book sometimes leaves us hanging. So let's go on to our other stuff. Go to program.cs. Do you think that it's in place? Ah, it's in the wrong place. I just drug car.partial into the EF folder. And then change your namespace to include .ef. Because it does include that folder name. Well, the errors went away for a second, but they're back, so okay. Let's go to our main. We're not quite there yet, so I'm gonna have to give you guys a video. I'll make a video with some of it. I think this has some really neat stuff. I think that some of the terms that we've talked about today are things that are good to have in your mind. I don't think they're things that you need to have a deep, deep understanding of, but I do think it's super cool. So I do want to make a video so we can at least finish this up, since we probably won't have time in class, but I'll get it going for you. So notice how it created all of your .cs files. And again, from what I'm understanding, if we have .cs files, we should be able to create syntax to create our tables and everything. So very interesting. Questions that I could answer with that partial. I'm going to save it. I'll get it all videoed for you. We'll figure it out. Great job. Monday we'll have a work day. Make sure you look at that serialization stuff to see if you have any questions, what we need to look at on it. But have a great weekend. Stay warm. Don't get like out in some sort of blizzard or something. Yeah, you don't need candy that bad. My mean husband, I told him we needed to get one of those blue pumpkins for food allergy children and get apples or candies or, you know, like goodies. And he was like, what? Sacrilegious, we're getting candy. And he was like, if they can't eat it, they can't eat it. And I was like, that's not very nice to me. Too bad. Yeah, he was like, if they can't eat a Three Musketeers, then they shouldn't be trick-or-treating. They should be.
I was talking to my friend, I was like, you know, what kind of candy are you getting for Halloween? He's like, I'm not giving out candy. I was like, didn't you as a kid go around trick-or-treating? Yeah. I was like, well, I believe you have a responsibility.
Now you do, that's right.
With all the lights out.
It doesn't matter. There's none that ever come to your house anyways. We had our house last year. We were so excited because we thought, well, we're on a busier street. Maybe we'll have trick-or-treaters, had all the lights on, Halloween decorations. No, our nephew came.
Whenever I lived right at Sunshine and Glintstone, like, I got a lot of trick-or-treaters.
That seems like a really bad place to trick-or-treat. It's so busy.
I mean, there's a neighborhood right between Mercy and Glintstone. And like, right there, it's
I
like
was thinking like, what, Placid Towers?
That's what I thought. Where are they going? So there were some, because we just thought they must all go to the mall or churches or something. Yeah.
That's where all the rich folks live.
Yeah, that's what I went.
I was living with my parents, like, there was no kids in the neighborhood. Like, there's no kids here. Everyone got old. And there'd be tons of kids from
There still would. In Carthage, there was just one big street with all the Victorian homes, and people that moved onto that street used to complain because they were like, we didn't know we were going to have to make a $500 investment in Halloween. Well, now you know, you moved onto that street. That's where everybody trick-or-treats, and that's the only one. The police have started shutting down the whole street, and it's like, if you live there, you have a responsibility. You bought the house. They don't like it.